Hello and very warm welcome to the Arise interview, 60 glorious minutes of multifaceted discussions where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and we feature the voices at the heart of the stories. I am Christian Ogodo. Thanks for joining us. Coming up in the next hour, the issues of human rights abuses in Nigeria and the fragrant disobedience of court orders by the federal government is in the front burner. A United Nations Special Rapporteur on a visit to Nigeria reports of violence in the country, saying that it completely left out the impact of intra-group violence on the rising spate of insecurity in the country. The human rights violation and the issues of violence give rise to extreme concern. We'll speak to the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission, Barrister Tony Ojukwu, in a moment. Later, Nigeria has recorded a double victory in London as the United Kingdom Commercial and Arbitration Court granted its request to halt the payment of the $9.6 billion fine it had granted in favor of Process and Industrial Development Limited, P&ID for short, of a failed gas supply and processing contract. We'll get analysis on the way forward in a moment. Nigeria is confronting nationwide, regional, and global pressure such as population explosion, an increased number of people living in poverty, police brutality, climate change, and desertification, with the increasing proliferation of weapons. The issue of human rights violation is another worrisome issue facing the country, whereby the federal government, in most cases, do not obey court orders and trample on the rights of citizens, making them live in fear of the unknown, like in a military regime. The United Nations Rapporteur on extrajudicial executions say there is no conclusive proof that the Islamic movement of Nigeria, for example, is an armed and dangerous group. Presenting a preliminary report, Agnes Kalamard said that despite several previous reports, human rights in Nigeria had not significantly improved.
This human rights expert has spent the last 2 weeks shuttling across Nigeria. She has met with stakeholders across theaters of conflict and tried to understand the scope of Nigeria's human rights challenges. Presenting her preliminary findings, she cautions Nigeria against allowing internal conflict to escalate.
I have asked the government as well as the international community, and I'm asking now for them to really prioritize and consider the situations in the Middle Belt, which appears to be spreading further south and further northwest. The conflict between over land, over resources, is a regional issue. I have seen evidence of it in Burkina Faso and in Mali. I have received allegations.
She is worried that law enforcement routinely uses lethal force to quell what may be civil disturbances. She is also bothered that sometimes state actors skip the courts and take the law into their hands.
Tried to understand what's happening and why the targeting of that particular group, and why and how it has been declared unlawful. The government has argued that this group is weaponized and is anti-Nigeria and anti-government. I have asked for the evidence to it, which so far I have not received.
As she prepares her final report, the UN Rapporteur is keen on discovering the catalyst that spark off violent and unending conflict across the country. What is touching is that her findings are not new. They simply indicate that decision makers have not implemented previous suggestions.
Well, for more on this, I've now been joined by Tony Ojukwu, who is a lawyer and is the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission. Very warm welcome to the Arise interview.
Thank you.
You must have your hands full on the issue of rights abuses in Nigeria, either from authorities, the military, the police, and other services, to even the federal government and the rest. How are you able, to sift through these loads or myriads of abuses every now and again before your commission?
Well, we've tried to put in place access points for Nigerians whose rights are violated to at least have a place where they can go and lay their complaints. Nigeria is a very big country, so it is not what you can stay in Abuja and do, because these issues happen in the communities, in the villages, and they can happen in any part of the country. So what we have done is to make sure that the Commission has an office in every state of the country. So we're in the 36 states of Nigeria now. We have offices, and we have handbills, we have social media handles, we have our website, we have ways of creating awareness around all the states so that people know where they can go to lodge.
Do you collaborate with an agency like the National Orientation Agency, for example, that can really get to the grassroots in the language that they understand?
Yeah, we do collaborate with all government agencies. We do collaborate with civil society organizations, because we appreciate that it is part of our strategic work plan to work with all those who are also working in the human rights sector to make sure we reach the nooks and crannies of the country, because it's quite an enormous task. So what we do is we have a complaint treatment mechanism where if people's rights are violated, first of all, they can complain to us. But we don't have to wait for people to complain.
Absolutely. I was just going to ask that, particularly the case of the notorious kidnapper in Taraba State,
Exactly.
Madume, and the army captain
Exactly.
that, led the execution of those gentle police officers.
Yes.
Is the Human Rights Commission, putting himself in that case?
Yeah, of course, when that happened, we made a statement. But you see, when something like that happens, it is our intervention is more important if nothing is happening. What I mean is, in that case, an investigation was already set up to find out what happened. But there are so many cases in this country where no investigation is set up by anybody. Those ones are more worrisome. You understand what I mean? But in that case, the federal government swung into action, set up a panel that was able to unravel what has happened, and the people involved are now being taken through the process of the law. So that's sufficient. Where there's problem is where things like this happen, extrajudicial killing and violation of rights, and nobody even talks about it. Nobody takes it as an issue of national concern.
Like the Ochanya case in Benue State, the little girl that was raped to death for several years by the guardian and the son.
Yeah, but of course the case is also in court, and the person has been arraigned in court.
Just one person.
Yeah.
And the other person up till now has not been declared wanted by the police.
It's not as if he has not been declared wanted. I think
there's no publication to support that.
They are trying to find out. Our inquiries show that trying to find, locate him, because I think it took off after the team broke into the limelight. Once the person is arrested, he will also come to trial. I believe that is what was going to happen in that case. But there are still so many other cases like that are not even being talked about. In my office every day, we receive even violation of children at the age of 3, at the age of 6. So it's becoming quite worrisome, the way these things are happening. And the challenge here is the predisposition of the law enforcement agents to cases like this. Now, poverty is a main issue. You find out, I know in criminal law, there's something you call compounding of issues. Now, what we discovered along the line is at times you start following, because once the commission is aware of this kind of violation, we insist that the law will follow its course. Also, compared to things like domestic violence, for instance, we face critical challenges in dealing with cases like that, because of the way the economy is, because of the poor empowerment of women. Now, you are faced with a situation where a woman who reports domestic violence to you in the morning, of course, you can't sweep that under the carpet. You now call upon the police authorities, you ask them to prosecute. Now, along the line, because of our culture and tradition, people now besiege the woman and tell her, you want your husband to go to jail? Who is going to pay your house rent? Who is going to pay your children's school fees? Who is going to provide for you? And this woman is a housewife. She has no other means of livelihood except the husband. So the next day she comes and tells you she wants to withdraw the case.
You're helpless.
You don't know what to do. Now you will insist.
Well, particularly because it's not a case of the state versus, Mr. A.
Yeah, because there are some human rights violations that are also criminal in nature.
Yeah.
In that one, then the state must take the center stage.
And the case must take its course.
It must take its course.
Yeah.
Because you cannot now say, because
you want to withdraw the case.
Exactly. No. But the police complains that there is nobody, if nobody is willing to stand as the complainant, so how will you get the evidence?
There's no case in court.
How will you get the evidence to prosecute? Because somebody must come and testify that I've been violated, this is what happened, and so on and so forth. And you also must look at the nature of our society, where there's a lot of stigmatization about if somebody comes to tell you, look, I've been raped or I've been abused. And so people stigmatize such people. So we need to be able to
like the
discourage stigmatization.
like the Koza
kind of case.
Pastor.
Yes.
Did you receive any such petition?
Yeah, we got the petition, and of course
it's so slow in going to court.
Well, of course, before you go to court, the police must have concrete evidence to ensure that there will be conviction. Because if the evidence is weak, you worsen the case, because
it will be thrown out.
It will be thrown out.
Yeah.
So the delay there is to be able to, because there are a lot of conflicting evidence. So it is better that the DPP looks at the evidence and makes sure that it is watertight to ensure a successful conviction. So that is what slows some of these cases at times. But of course, at times the Nigerian factor is also there. You never can tell.
Do you come under pressure sometimes when you have such high-profile cases?
Well, I must also say that we are lucky, because people.
Oh, okay, sorry, Barrister. I think I'm just going to put you on pause there, because
okay.
We want to take some commercial messages. When we return, you'll be answering that question. You're watching the Arise interview. We have more when we return. Stay with us. You're welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of the stories. I am Christian Ogodo. Thanks for staying with us. And I have Barrister Tony Ojukwu. He's the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission here in Nigeria. You were given a submission, before we went on the short commercial break. You want to continue in that line?
Yeah, just let's go through that again. Now, we're looking at a situation where if somebody has reported some case and there's nobody to stand as witness in the police station or in the court, of course, that's going to be difficult to prosecute. So
your hands are tied in such situations and the rest. Okay, let's quickly look at a wider perspective of these rights abuses, because it can't be isolated, and that's why you had the United Nations Rapporteur on Human Rights Abuses, who presented a report on the 2nd of September. The federal government did reply to say they aren't wholesomely correct in their submissions. I'm talking about Agnes Kalamad. You know, she's the Special Rapporteur to Nigeria. But look at some critical issues here that they raised. For example, in March 2014, it is alleged that at least 640 recaptured detainees from Giwa barracks were killed by soldiers of the Nigerian army. Again, they say on 1st of March 2018, the corpses of 28 men were brought to the mortuary, their bodies showing evidence of gunshot wounds. The men had reportedly been shot after a screening in Bama local government area. Remember, Bama was the headquarters of the Boko Haram insurgency at the height until 2015, when the Nigerian military chased them out of the place and overran them. You got such abuses like this, such extrajudicial killings, not only by the military, but even by the police. And even Amnesty International Nigeria have criticized such rights abuses. What's your commission been doing about these cases? They are not new to you, are they?
Yeah, we've heard of all these allegations. In as much as we are not privy to the investigation that was carried out by those who are making the allegations, but we are conscious of the fact.
They don't carry along like Amnesty International, like the United Nations Special Rapporteur.
Well,
when they come to the country, Amnesty International Nigeria operates in the country. They don't invite you as the Apex Commission on Human Rights in Nigeria.
we see the publication when they make the publication.
That's the only time you see them.
Yes, and also the rapporteur also visits us and says these are allegations being made. But looking at that, what we don't waive the fact that these allegations may have happened. You know, at times we are not able to investigate them. You know, because at times the evidence is no longer there for you to investigate. These are things that may have happened in the past, and it's coming to your knowledge now. If something happened in 2014 about people who were killed, those people may have been buried now. They may no longer be in the mortuary for you to go and find out whether they were shot or not.
In advanced crimes, they exhume corpses and still carry out the necessary DNA.
We don't have such.
Your commission does not have such sophistication.
We don't have
so such people are dead and they are gone.
So it's a major challenge, but the government has the capacity to investigate that. You know, because the police and the military themselves should be able to have that kind of capacity. Because
so in what areas do you ever challenge the government that sets your commission up when they violate the rights of Nigerians?
In so many areas. In so many areas. For instance, you would have heard about our report on the police and SARS, the SARS violations. You know, you would have heard about the Apo killings some time ago.
The Apo 6.
Not the Apo 6. There were the Apo.
Okay,
the Okada riders.
Yeah, the Okada riders. Yeah, allegedly by the State Security Service.
So, and then the commission did a public hearing on that and found out that these were not terrorists. These were just innocent Okada riders who were just linked like that. So the commission awarded damages against the DSS, and
have they paid?
They have paid that now. We pursued them, we insisted, and in April last year, the DSS paid a sum of about 135 million to the families of all those who were bereaved and injured. And our latest report on police and SARS indicted a lot of police officers for extrajudicial killing, for extortion, for torture, for inhuman and degrading treatment, for seizing property of Nigerians, and auctioning their vehicles, and so many things. And
without any court,
without due process. Without due process, we were able to recover some vehicles, and we've handed them over to their owners.
And the people who do that, are they prosecuted?
Yes, of course, we don't prosecute.
Absolutely,
We have
I don't.
recommended to the government to prosecute them.
Yeah.
We have submitted our report to the president, and the president himself was quite appreciative of the work we have done, and he was not happy, and he set up another 3-man committee to look at that report and advise him on the implementation. And the 3-man committee has completed its work now, and any time from now, they submit their findings to the government, and I believe that something will be done about it.
Okay, let me just quickly take the reaction briefly of the Nigerian government when the UN rapporteur on extrajudicial killing and arbitrary executions made their statement, and the federal government, of course, responded very copiously, where the presidency, described the recent United Nations rapporteur report of violence in Nigeria as disappointing, saying that it completely left out the impact of intra-group violence to the rising spate of insecurity in the country. And that in that area, you'll be talking of the headers, farmers clashes, certain communal clashes like is even ongoing in the boundaries of Ebonyi and Cross River State. How do you intercede in such situations?
Now, what we do is we try to mainstream human rights into the operations of the law enforcement agents, the security forces, and the law. So we've taken note that because of our past of being under military regime, that the military and law enforcement agents seem to have started their career without so much respect for human rights. But now we are in the...
Oh, the language you understand is violence.
Yes, it's just with immediate effect.
Even in a democracy.
So the hangover is still there. So it is something we need to deal with structurally, psychologically and otherwise.
But it should really start from the roots. I mean, from the training institutions.
Exactly.
That's where they must imbibe the culture of civility.
That's the point. So we are attacking it from all angles. We have been training the military seriously on how to mainstream human rights into their operations, on their rules of engagement, on international humanitarian law, on the law, the Geneva Convention on wars and things like that. So to make them understand, to make them transform from a military in a military regime and military in a democratic regime. And you can see, even though there are still violations, the violations are reducing by the day. I give you an instance. When this terrorism started, the volume of violations then cannot be compared to the volume of violations now. And this is attributable to the serious engagement of the Commission with the military. Right in the front lines. We don't only stop at the barracks. We go to the brigades. We go to the front lines. We are in Woza, we're in Konduga, we're in Pulka, training military officers in the front lines. So that has impacted on their understanding. For instance, some of the military officers will tell you, look, my friend, you are talking human rights here. I went out with 3 of my colleagues in the morning. It's only me that came back now.
Yeah.
And now I arrest that officer, you say I should give him Indomie to eat. So we try to make them understand that, yes, if you are on the front line, you shoot to kill. But if you have arrested somebody alive,
you don't kill him again.
You don't kill him. Otherwise, it becomes extrajudicial killing. You must now pass through a judicial process before you can execute such a person.
Okay, we've got barely 3 minutes left with you, but quickly, there is one touchy area also found out by the UN rapporteur, that's of the LGBTQI, and she says that concluded, or rather, she found out, examined specifically the killings of women and members of the LGBTQI community. Have you been receiving such reports from this group?
We have not received such reports, but the members of the community visited me about 2 months ago, and we discussed all issues about the kind of discrimination they are undergoing in the community. And we encourage them to please speak out, to please let us know. And we've also agreed with them that even when we get complaints now, one of the points of disaggregation of the complaints would be complaints relating to LGBTI, so that we can start putting data in place to see the nature of the complaints, to see the nature of the violations they are having. Even though the law says they cannot practice certain things,
homosexuality,
which is against our culture, but that doesn't make them not to be human beings. They are still entitled to right to freedom of association, right to freedom of movement, right to food, right to water, right to light, right to health. So we need to know the boundaries.
So this is cultural inhibitions against modernity.
Modernity and international standards.
I so wish we had all of the time to, continue to look at the parameters and the obviousity of all these rights abuses. But let me still thank you, Tony Ojukwu, the Executive Secretary of the National Human Rights Commission. Thanks for coming on the Arise interview.
Thank you for having me.
You're watching the Arise interview. We've got more still ahead, including a double victory in London as the United Kingdom Commercial and Arbitration Court granted its request to halt the payment of the $9.6 billion fine. Stay with us.